The Kalawijaya Kris is said to have originated during the early reign of the Kingdom of Galuh, crafted under divine guidance at the twilight of the Tarumanagara era. According to oral tradition, it was forged by an ancient empu, master blacksmith, named Rahiyang Sankayana, who meditated for 40 days and nights at the banks of the Sitandui River. During his final vision, he witnessed a celestial fire descending upon a black iron ore buried beneath Mount Galunggung. This rare ore, known as Wasi Kuning Tapak Langit, yellow iron from the footprint of heaven, was believed to contain the spirit of the elements, fire, wind, and lightning. The empu combined this ore with meteoric metal, infusing the kris with a swirling pamor pattern that appeared alive in the moonlight. The kris was then tempered with water from 7 sacred springs and blood from a white rooster sacrificed at dawn. Named Kalawijaya, meaning time of victory or eternal triumph, the kris was not merely a weapon. It was a cosmic tool meant to balance the forces of dharma and adharma. It was imbued with a spiritual resonance that responded only to rightful kings or those with pure hearts. It was first gifted to Prabu Redikandayun, the founder of Galuh, by the empu himself, who vanished into the mists of the forest after presenting it. From that moment on, the Kalawijaya Kris became the sacred companion of Galuh's rulers, passed from king to king like a thread of divine legitimacy. The Kalawijaya Kris is described as having a long, slender blade with 13 lux, curves, each symbolizing a stage of cosmic transformation. The blade is adorned with a swirling pamor kawang pattern that shifts subtly with the angle of light, said to resemble the eye of the gods watching over the kingdom. The base of the blade, ganja, bears intricate carvings of lotus petals and coiled serpents, symbolizing spiritual awakening and the guarding of knowledge. Its hilt, made of ebony wood from Mount Sawal, is shaped like a dancing celestial being and inlaid with a large green peridot stone, believed to contain the energy of inner peace and prophetic dreams. The waranka sheath is just as legendary. Carved from sandalwood and lined with fine golden filigree, it is said to emit a faint calming fragrance when unsheathed during sacred rituals. A serpent motif wraps around its length, a reference to Nagasari, the divine guardian of ancestral wisdom. According to old records, the kris could vibrate slightly in the presence of betrayal and glow faintly when held by one chosen to lead. During royal coronations, it was placed on the altar beside the Sangyang Tapak staff, signifying the union of mental clarity and spiritual authority. Despite its ornate beauty, the Kalawijaya Kris was never used in battle in the traditional sense. It was meant for ritual invocation, state decisions, and spiritual warfare, facing unseen forces rather than human enemies. Over the centuries, the Kalawijaya Kris was carried by several kings of Galuh, most notably Prabu Redikandayun, Rahiyang Mandiminyak, and Prabu Sena, Brata Sanawa. Each ruler had unique experiences with the kris that shaped their reigns and added new layers to its mystique. Prabu Redikandayun was said to meditate with the kris under the moonlight before announcing major reforms. His insight into unifying the Sunda and Galuh territories came after one such session, where the blade reportedly glowed faint green in response to his vision. Rahiyang Mandiminyak, the second ruler, reportedly used the kris to settle disputes during a period of political tension. When placed between feuding nobles, the kris allegedly emitted a subtle hum, interpreted as divine disapproval, forcing both parties to reconcile. Prabu Sena's relationship with the kris was more complicated. He was deeply spiritual, but faced internal rebellion. Legends say that on the eve of his abdication, he knelt with the Kalawijaya Kris in the royal temple, and it wept with condensation, believed to be a sign of the kingdom's sorrow. There are accounts of the kris revealing visions and dreams, guiding rulers toward justice or warning them of approaching danger. One tale even tells of a servant who dared to touch it with impure intent and fainted instantly, his hair turning white overnight. Through each reign, the kris was treated not as property but as a sacred advisor, a spiritual artifact whose power could elevate or curse, depending on the soul who held it. The Kalawijaya Kris was more than a royal symbol. It was believed to be alive with spiritual forces that manifested in both subtle and miraculous ways. Among its most revered powers was the ability to discern truth from falsehood. In traditional accounts, when the kris was placed between two disputants, its blade would tremble or remain still depending on which side spoke honestly. Another recorded power was its ability to amplify inner vision and intuition. When meditated upon, particularly during the full moon, the wielder would receive visions, sometimes of future events, warnings of betrayal, or glimpses of celestial beings. Kings of Galuh used the kris during critical decisions, not for counsel from advisors but for communion with the spirit realm. There were also reports of the Kris serving as a guardian spirit. During battles where the Kris was present on the altar of the palace, enemies would feel unnaturally confused or disoriented, as if a fog had clouded their minds. Some claimed to see a green flame flicker around the Kris when someone with evil intent came near. Its most dramatic tale involves Prabu Mandiminyak, who reportedly struck the ground with Kalawijaya during a drought. Rain began to fall within the hour, saving the crops of eastern Galuh. The Kris was then revered not just as a royal item, but a divine bridge between humans and the elements. Despite its powers, the Kris demanded purity. If used with anger, pride, or selfishness, it would grow cold, dull its shine, and even cause misfortune to its bearer. As such, only kings or high shamans were ever allowed to touch or carry the blade. The Kalawijaya Kris became a central figure in the myths of Galuh, entwined with tales of ancestral spirits, cosmic battles, and divine tests. One of the most popular legends tells of Ni Rarasati, the spirit maiden of Mount Galunggung, who once tried to claim the Kris by disguising herself as a royal priestess. The Kris, sensing her deceit, burst into flame and cast her illusion aside. Another famous story is the Night of the Green Sky. When a comet passed over Galuh during the reign of Prabu Sena, the Kris was said to have glowed so brightly that its light could be seen through the walls of the royal temple. Priests interpreted this as a sign that the spirit world was aligning in preparation for great change. Days later, a rebellion forced Prabu Sena to retreat and begin a spiritual pilgrimage. In some versions of the Galuh Sunda unification legend, the Kris played a symbolic role. It was laid alongside the Sangyang Tapak staff to confirm divine approval of merging the two kingdoms under one crown. The fact that both heirlooms resonated simultaneously was considered proof of spiritual harmony between the dynasties. The blade also features in folk theater and Sundanese pantun, often as a divine item that tests the hero's worthiness. In these tales, even demons and monsters fear its shine, calling it the tongue of the silent thunder. Children in certain areas of Siamis and Tasikmalaya still tell stories of seeing a green flash of light in the forest at night, which elders say is the spirit of Kalawijaya guarding the hidden grave of a forgotten king. The current whereabouts of the Kalawijaya Kris remain a mystery, surrounded by speculation and sacred silence. Some believe it was hidden deep within Mount Sawal during the fall of Galuh's influence, sealed inside a stone chamber protected by spiritual wards. Others claim it was secretly taken to a temple in Bali or Dieng Plateau by wandering shamans who foresaw political collapse. Despite its physical absence, the Kris lives on through ritual, myth, and cultural memory. During Sundawiwitan ceremonies and certain Siptagalar ancestral rituals, a replica or symbolic stand-in of Kalawijaya is placed on the altar to represent the voice of divine kingship and ancestral wisdom. In academic and esoteric circles, the Kris is studied as an example of pre-Islamic spiritual weaponry, a bridge between human intention, metallurgy, and the unseen forces of nature. Artisans today still attempt to replicate its design, but none have captured its mythical essence. Local elders in Galuh heartland say that Kalawijaya will return when Sunda is truly united in heart and purpose. In their view, it is not merely a weapon, but the soul of the kingdom itself, hidden not just in forest or stone, but in the collective spirit of its people. Thus, the Kris Kalawijaya continues to inspire devotion, storytelling, and hope. It is a symbol of balance, clarity, and eternal vigilance, waiting for the rightful hand to one day raise it once more beneath the sacred skies of Galuh.